Welcome back, everybody, to the School Leadership Show. With me, as always, co-host Jen David Lang. Hi, Jen.
Hey, Mike, how you doing?
Fabulous. And we're going to talk about one of my favorite books in recent memory, The Anxious Generation by Jonathan Haidt. And before we get into that, though, we also have a very special guest with us who's going to add some great color commentary to what we're talking about. Dave Blanchard is the superintendent of the Schoharie School District in upstate New York, and he's joining us today. He's got a really cool background because he hasn't just been a superintendent forever. So welcome, Dave, and we'll hear more about your background as we get going. And welcome.
Thanks, Mike. I appreciate it. I'm looking forward to discussing the book.
All right. So, Jen, why don't you get us started? Because you've done a summary of it, and there's a lot in this book. He's an unbelievable author and so well researched. But you want to kind of hit the highlights for us?
Sure, yeah. And yeah, it's a big topic, an important one. And I'm happy to send any of your listeners if they would like a summary, but also I'm going to have discussion questions for any leaders who would like to engage their families with questions. But again, so this is a book called The Anxious Generation: How the Great Rewiring of Childhood is Causing an Epidemic of Mental Illness by Jonathan Haidt. And it almost instantly was on the New York Times bestseller list. Everybody's talking about it. So let's first start with why. Like what's in this book? So his basic premise is that because of two recent changes in childhood, we have been preventing kids from having a mentally healthy upbringing. And those two changes are that at the same time as we are overprotecting them in the real world, that is like no playgrounds are walking by themselves, we're always hovering. And then at the same time, we have been underprotecting them with everything they're doing on smartphones and social media. So I know districts are in all kinds of different places about what they're doing, but we will talk about that a little bit later when we chat with Dave. So just to give you an idea, in the book, he points to research that shows that starting in the beginning of the 2000s, the rates of depression among U.S. teens were fairly steady. But then in 2010, there was a sharp increase where the number of teens who reported at least one major depressive episode began to rise steeply and steadily, and crazy number by 2021, that had increased 150%. So these are alarming statistics, and they come with increases in anxieties, suicide, self-harm. So what's going on? Why that change from 2000 to 2010 and then 2021? What's going on? And so, first of all, a lot of the things we think are going on, he argues, are not the reason that it's going on. So one, some people say, oh, kids are overreporting. But he says, no, there's actual suicides and emergency room visits. So that's not reporting. Two, are kids more willing to acknowledge mental illness? They are, and that's a good thing, as I'm sure Dave will share with us from his background. But that doesn't account for all the increases in suicide and self-harm. What about COVID? Well, these numbers started going up in 2010, a good 10 years before COVID. What about, the whole world? If you talk to any teen, they're worried about climate and everything that's happening in our political world. Well, the increases are across the world. We're talking UK, Canada, Australia, and obviously the crises are different from country to country. So what is going on? What happened to kids between 2010 and 2021? And he argues there's been a drastic reduction in real world experiences. That is, kids having face-to-face experiences with their peers, their friends, their colleagues, their teachers. And they're having less time to play freely and more time on smartphones, which are very untested. We don't really know the impact, or we didn't at the time when we introduced them, of all this social media. So he's been very big in the media, controversial to some, saying this is what schools should be doing. Schools should be banning phones and increasing free play. So I just want to go back for a minute to what he says that all kids need, that the lack of play and the increase of social media is hurting. So he says all kids for healthy development, first of all, they need free play. That is, they choose it, they direct it themselves, who they're playing with, how they're playing with, face to face. That's how they learn to cooperate, right? After free play, they need attunement. That's when you are attuned to the emotions of other people, right? Starting with a baby, you learn, right? Your mother, your father smiling, oh, they're happy. You have to respond to the emotions of other people while you're with them face to face. So kids need free play, attunement, social learning, learning in groups, right? That's what we do in school. That's what they do at home. They learn, oh, if I'm really nasty, then I'm not going to get picked to play dodgeball. Or, they learn these things naturally by being in these social environments. And then finally, agency, which is taking on the appropriate amount of challenges and trying new things. So they need free play, attunement, social learning, and agency. And he's arguing that our phones and our lack of freedom is affecting those things. And so he calls those two things experience blockers. We have blocked our kids from having actual face-to-face real life experiences. First of all, the smartphones. They're addicting. Kids have push notifications. They are drawn further and further in. And by 2015, 70% of American teens had their own screen, right, everywhere, like having the smartphone in your pocket changed everything. So 2015 was a really big year. That's when the numbers really tipped. And today, teens spend about 50 hours a week on screen-based leisure activities. And 45% say they use the internet almost constantly. So these numbers have really gone up, and there are all these algorithms to pull them further and further into the virtual world. So the first experience blocker, he says, is a smartphone. And what does that do? Well, it's killing our kids' sleep, right? It's killing our kids' opportunities to learn and be socially with other people. It's addicting, and it's fragmenting their attention, right? All those notifications, all those, oh, let me check my phone, all of that. So that's a huge problem. And then the second experience blocker is what he calls safetyism. So I don't know how old everyone is, but maybe you remember like back from the 1980s, like stranger danger. And we were taught, about like, don't get into cars and take candy from strangers. And somehow parents started to develop this fear of strangers. So I don't know, Dave and Mike, how old you were when you first walked to school. I grew up in New York City, in Manhattan. My mom showed me how to ride the bus. I was 8 years old. I started taking the bus by myself. I think at 10, I started taking the subway. I walked everywhere at 8 and 10. And now you would be hard pressed to find 8 and 10-year-olds actually walking to school, playing in a playground. We are just interfering with their independence and their ability to negotiate the real world on their own. You look like you were going to say something, Mike. How old were you when you walked by yourself to a friend's house? And I think you're on mute, Mike, so start again.
First time. I saw Dave putting his hand up for 5. I walked to kindergarten. I mean,
Yeah.
as a kid. So, well, and here's an interesting thing too. So my children are 18 and 22. How old are yours, Jen?
Mine are 20 and 23.
Dave?
Yes, 30, 28, 19, and 21.
Okay. So we have all as parents contributed to these Gen Z kids and their phones. So I think we all have to own a little bit of it too, but that's okay. Like that's the whole point of today. So, all right, so let's get into it. And so one of his things is to ban phones, right? Like coming out big like that. We've heard the governor of New York State talking about how, she's looking at something from the state level, but really, all politics is local, right? So Dave, you're a superintendent in a school district, rural school district in upstate New York. You want to talk to folks a little bit about your background and then maybe kind of how you arrived at this idea of looking at cell phones as a lever to affect school change?
Sure. So, Mike, really in this book, the author talks about standing on whales fishing for minnows. And what a great analogy for schools to think about this idea of a ban on cell phones. And that is like a big undertaking. The idea that we're going to transform our school climates by having a ban on cell phones. our district looked at it like from a bit of a different standpoint. We said we need to create a distraction-free environment. We need to have a time where our kids are free from the distractions of cell phones. And that was a big decision. One that took a lot of communication, a lot of work with our school board and our school community. My training was as a school psychologist. So coming back post-pandemic, three years ago or so, looking at kids walking through the hallways with earbuds and smartwatches and cell phones, completely disconnected and socially isolated, we made a decision at that point. We were going to move forward with a distraction-free environment.
Now,
And we-
Dave, hang on a second. So when give us timeline wise, because I know because we've got school administrators and aspiring school administrators listening, and the devil's in the details with stuff like this. Yeah, even if you can get to the point of everybody in agreement on not having cell phones in school, then there's implementation. Like, can you talk
Yes.
a little bit generally about the timeline between recognizing it's a problem in 22 and then getting to a decision of this is what we're going to do?
Yes, and so we were in 2021, the end of the school year, where we did our shared building leadership, district leadership team came together. So a stakeholder group and said, we have a problem. And that stakeholder group was made up of parents, community members, teachers, school administrators. And somebody in that group said, you know, have you ever heard of Yonder? Yonder was at that time was being used in comedy shows where they would lock up the phones, and people were surprised, like, wait, you're going to lock up my phone at a comedy show? Well, we started investigating that and found out they have an application for schools. So then we went and found a school in Massachusetts in Chicopee, Mass, visited that school. They had implemented in March. We visited toward the end of May with school board members, teachers, myself, and the school principal. And we saw a transformed high school. We saw a high school where kids were engaged with each other, socializing with each other, talking to each other. It was impressive. And
Before you go further, Dave, I
yes,
still want to go back a little bit like Mike wanted to. So it sounds like you jumped right in and Yonder. What about the parents who were part of the stakeholder group? Did you get
yes.
pushback? Did you have some parents say, wait a minute, there's school shootings. I want to be in touch with my kid 24/7. Tell us a little bit about that.
So we had a public forum, and in that public forum, we rolled out what our plan was and what it would look like. And parents were not happy about it. And they were, you know, to say they're not happy, it was a few hours long and it was really rough. The idea of school safety, we had our SRO, the idea that there was law enforcement in the meeting who, we all talk about school safety and we know cell phones don't keep kids safe in schools because parents trust us when their kids are in kindergarten to come to school without a cell phone. So we know, if you have a phone in your hand in the most dire moments, you're not listening to the adults and following the direction that we would want to. And if you have something in your hand, law enforcement is going to be concerned that that's a weapon. So we know that cell phones don't follow our safety protocols, that we need to stow them away in crisis.
And was that enough to convince the parents? Was that it?
No, I only convinced in that public forum, I only convinced one parent. One parent left and said, I think this is the right thing to do. 3 years later, I get thank yous from parents. I get thank yous from students. I have students telling me I transferred to upstate New York from Washington, D.C. When I found out I couldn't have my cell phone here, it was horrible. And 2 weeks in, I started to develop friendships and connections with people that I never thought I would have if you didn't have that distraction-free environment policy in place. So we've invited multiple schools, probably 20 to 25 schools have visited, seen it, and some have implemented, some have seen the challenges and said, all right, we need more government. And this is very hard as a local decision. But our neighboring schools have all said, well, our kids are afraid they put their cell phones away because they're afraid they're gonna move to an even more restrictive policy. So
So
what
you
we-
moved ahead without the full parent support, is what you're
we
saying.
moved ahead because it was the right thing to do. So even my school board wanted us to allow cell phones during non-structured times. Even the Board of Education said, well, can't they have them during lunch and can't they have them, you know, in between periods? And we said, no, we want a distraction-free environment all day from the minute they walk in to the minute they leave. And now, day one, hour one, we implemented, we saw a transformation. So immediate transformation. In other words, we saw kids talking to each other, socializing, engage with each other. We had students that went into the guidance the first day and said, if I can't have my cell phone, put me in elective courses. I don't want study hall. We have students that couldn't figure out how to navigate conflict, because we all know you can't solve a conflict on a cell phone, but yet our kids were trying. That's how they get a message on their phone, something causes a disruption, they call mom, they send the message to mom, and never having words with other people on how to resolve conflict. So now our guidance, our school counselors had to reteach kids how to engage with each other and resolve issues that came up between their peers. But it created deeper, more meaningful friendships here in our school district, and kids soon realized the kids that they have on their different apps, Snapchat, Instagram, TikTok, that are sending them messages that they've never met in their lives. They just know them from other school districts and have them via social media, weren't their real friends. They developed deeper friendships here, and now when schools come to visit and see this, kids are actually talking about it. They feel it, they see the connection. So
This
So,
is impressive,
Dave,
very
hey,
impressive, Dave, all of these reactions and results. I'm wondering if you can tell us what was the date that you started the ban, and if you've also seen any impact academically as well.
Yes, so we started the band. This is the start of our third school year with the band. So 2023-24 and 2022-23. So September 5th or 6th, 2022-23 is when we started the band. We've never looked back, and it's never come up to look back. So once implemented, and implemented effectively, students just, it's like, we all know we don't swear when we're in church, right? Why not? Because there's a high expectation that you behave appropriately and you don't use foul language in church. Schools need to draw a line somewhere to raise healthy kids, right? So we can't turn a blind eye to things that are causing them harm. Cell phones cause kids harm in schools every day. So we could no longer turn a blind eye to that. So therefore it became a hill to die on. And the result, seeing kids socialize and engage and work through conflict, was certainly a benefit. The academics, walking past our classrooms and seeing kids talking to each other, looking up at the teacher, engaged in dialogue around the curriculum has been really impressive. I had teachers prior, she taught calculus, and she said, I can't do this anymore. And she said, I'm going to the retirement board, I have to retire. And so that teacher, the following year, we got her to stay on. We committed to no cell phones. And her one thing was, I have students that are telling me they learn better with their earbuds in. And I'm like, it's just not a thing. So she's still here, 3 years later. And I've had teachers, when I have schools visit, I have teachers talking about the transformation in our classrooms and what it looks like, because it really does look like, there's a lot of talk, you can't put the genie back in the bottle. We have cell phones, they're here to stay. In Schoharie Central School District, kids know how and when to use their cell phones appropriately. They know when to put them away because we created structure. So much of the main idea of the book is to have this ban, so to speak, on cell phones in school, and then have, more time for play. and engaging kids in more playful activities. So that at that point where we implemented, we also created a lot of clubs, outdoor adventure club, hiking club, skiing. We started taking kids to trips. We did a 4-day, an overnight trip to DC for all 11th graders. We have all 10th graders that do an overnight trip to Philadelphia. So we increased our intramural offerings at the elementary level, and we began to offer intramural athletics at the secondary level and at middle school. So we started to look at this concept of how do we make school more engaging for students, not just academically, but socially. Our cafeteria, so kids have lunch, and then we have a gaming area where there's a foosball table, there's a air hockey table, there's what are those things called? Pinball games. So we've kind of tried to create this environment where kids could engage with each other. So this idea of, you know, free play is important. So the two premises of the book that are really, you know, that you gravitate toward are this ban of this really destructive technology and how to do that in a school versus how to get kids to socially play and connect with each other. And so, you know, the chapter on what schools can do, if we haven't grabbed you with the book yet, that chapter alone, you know, should do it. Yeah, it's super exciting, the book. So yes, I love talking about it.
So Dave, okay, it can't be all rainbows and unicorns. I mean, there had to have been some challenges with implementation. Was there anything in particular that as it went, because you were one of the, I don't know, you were the first person that I knew that did it in upstate, in New York, really. I don't know if there were others or if you even know, but there had to be some challenges with implementation.
The challenge was that forum, you know, bringing the public together to say that we were doing this, that was not pretty, but we, you know, we did it anyway. And then once we implemented, so we had to use that tool with Fidelity. So Yonder and using the pouch with Fidelity year one. What we discovered about halfway through the year is, you know, as we're looking around trying to figure it out, kids there was no longer the addiction because there was nobody else to message or Snapchat. Yeah, so now the tool is in place and we realized it was easy to pull off because the kids that you would be messaging are in your class with you, or they're in the class next door, and nobody has their cell phones. So we had an event where our kids attended a concert hall with about 9 other districts. So small concert hall performance. There might be, you know, 1,500 people in the room, and our 50 people were in the center of the room and had their cell phones, because one of the things we allow for is during the course of the school day while you're in the building, you can't have it, but when you leave the building, you have your phone. So all of our kids had our phone. The person that was chaperoning that event came back and she's like, you won't believe what I saw. And I'm like, explain to me, what did you see? She's like, Dave, we were front and center in this, and our kids all had access to their cell phones. In the 9 other districts around them, everyone had their cell phones out. They were on their phones, they were distracted, they weren't paying attention. Our kids never took their phones out. And then this summer, I went to a summer school program to see 9 of our kids who had to attend summer school. And as I visited, everybody had access to their phones. The 9 kids from my district were not on their phones when I visited that room. And I'm watching kids from the 7 other districts that all sent to this BOCES program on their phones. And so the premise here that teaching kids when, how, and where it's appropriate to be on their phones, it all gets easier when you set the structure. So for families, now, when I say leave your phone downstairs, phones don't belong in bedrooms, technology should be controlled and monitored. And the book really lays that out. When is it appropriate to have a cell phone? Age 16, 14, he says, age 16 for social media apps. So, things that I'd done as a parent, I'm a school psychologist by trade. My wife's a school counselor. It was fairly easy for us to set the tone for what the expectations are around cell phones in my house. But I know that's not true in society today. Younger and younger kids, the safetyism that Jen talked about, parents want their kids to have phones for safety. We all know they don't make them any more safe. So much of this is common sense, but it's hard to process because everybody's doing it, everybody has them. But when you just kind of chunk it down and think, all right, how do I want my kids? What are my expectations? What are the structures for my school system? What are the structures for family systems? Routine, structure, expectations are really important, but free play and letting kids be kids is monumental. That has to happen. We have to get back to that.
I just think
So
it's
impressive.
cool from a metacognitive standpoint that now you've basically shown kids that they learn better when they're not distracted. So like that whole idea of I learn better with my earbuds in, whatever. No, we know that's not a thing. But like, so you hear from kids obviously that say school is better without access to my cell phone.
Right. It's the socialization and seeing kids doing activities and having experiences that schools like, I talked about it earlier. We have outdoor adventure club and we went to, so that club, again, it's a bit structured, but kids were allowed to visit a fish hatchery and then go out and stock streams and lakes and ponds in the area during the school day. And that was experiential, giving kids experiences that enhance their learning, enhance their development beyond the typical classroom is where we have to shift priorities in order to re-engage kids because the level of crisis that we have as a result of the immersion into this virtual world, this I'm losing the word right now, but the idea that it's a virtual world and we're not living in real time in it. We live we live in real time when we have experiences with other people.
Exactly. It's hard to be asynchronous when you're looking.
There's the word.
I got you, Dave. So,
Thank you.
well, I mean, what about one of the arguments that I hear all the time, not hear all the time, but I guess a counter argument is, when people say, oh, well, how we're limiting students' rights or whatever. Well, we do that all the time. You can't smoke cigarettes in a classroom. You can't drink alcohol in a classroom. Like, come on, we do that all the time. And we age gate things and we put limits on things because their prefrontal cortexes aren't developed yet. Like, and it's so interesting to me that we completely missed that one with cell phones.
And
Can I ask a question about that though? So, right, we don't allow smoking cigarettes or drinking alcohol, but in health class, we do teach kids about that. So, the argument that I've heard for allowing the cell phones is, like you said, Dave, cell phones aren't going anywhere. We're not going back. So, have you created some space in the school day or the curriculum to teach about responsible use? Because clearly, outside of the hours in your building, the kids are on Snapchat and TikTok and all of that. So have you done any teaching about responsible use with social
Yes,
media?
and unfortunately, it's sort of tied to our SEL curriculum. So, schools are great at investing right now in mental health services and investing in SEL curriculum. So tied to our social emotional learning is this this virtual world and the pitfalls and how to when it's appropriate. I just want to go back to something though. Like our kids know that it's inappropriate to have their phones out when they're trying to learn. It's something they can sort of get away with. And when our kids go to college and the professor says, you can be on your phone, you won't pass my class, but you can be on your phone. So I have two college age kids right now. And I said, what happens with your cell phones? And, I have the one Catholic university, and the other one goes to Fairfield University, and their tuition isn't cheap. And they know if they fail their classes, they're gonna have to pay. So in colleges, it kind of happens naturally, but in public high schools, K to 12, we have this problem. We don't know how to say no to kids. Like, yeah, we do. We wouldn't, to Mike's point, let them smoke in school. So we know that social media has a profound influence on kids, and it's making them anxious, to the point of, these skyrocketing rates of depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation, suicide attempts. That's all real. We all know it's real. Everyone that runs a school knows it's real. And we also know it's real dating back to 2010. So we've known this is coming. And yet, what do we do about it? How do we attack it? And moving your school community to a cell phone free, a distraction free environment is how we catch the whale, instead of, doing these little tiny things, catching minnows, and put your cell phone away for 9 periods a day, 5 days a week, for 180 days. We have teachers telling kids, put your cell phones away, as opposed to banning them in school for the length of the school day. That's not a hard thing. It's just, getting over the hurdle of it is hard. Once you actually implement, not so hard.
So are you finding it spills over into their personal lives? So I'm curious, given these skyrocketing rates of self-harm and depression and anxiety, are you finding there have been declines in those rates of suicidality and all that among your students, or is it too soon to tell?
From a purely statistical standpoint, it's a little early for me to have the data. Our referral rate went up the first year we implemented because we had a number of cell phone referrals, but our actual referral behavioral data without those cell phone referrals declined. And then in last year, we saw the same decline, and we saw fewer cell phone referrals, much fewer, and like an almost insignificant number, like 60 cell phone referrals or something like that. So it's just become the expectation. And the key is to have teachers and administrators holding hands on this initiative. Having it, and it's got to be equally important to teachers and to school leadership. So that's how that makes it most effective.
It's interesting, I've heard that, it's a big change. It's not a small change given how much a part of people's lives the cell phones are. And so, it's not just like banning baseball caps or something, or gum. It's much bigger. And so it sounds like you really had one event that involved parents and then went ahead. Do you recommend that now, several years down the line, that leaders spend more time getting information out and getting feedback? Or no, you think it's better
No.
just to no?
Just no. So I've been involved in a number of public forums for other school districts and talking about this issue. And at this point, the people that are coming out to those forums tend to know this is what needs to happen. Most people see the writing on the wall. Parents know how hard it is and how addicted their kids are. Like, we all know it. In fact, I mean, everyone leans on their phone way too heavy. I lean on my phone way too heavy. I'm way too connected to my emails and messages that come in 24/7 and managing, which causes too much stress. So, and let me hit that for a second. At any point in the day, and when the author's talking about TikTok, Snapchat, Instagram, and so on, he's saying, they're sending out notifications, where kids are getting notifications every minute or so, and those notifications, and then you get messages from mom, or you get messages from friends, and messages from people who may not be your friend. At any moment during the course of the school day, one of those messages can cause you to be anxious, depressed, really feel uneasy. We all have it. The fact that either social media or a message from, my wife messaging me to pick up vegetables before I come home. caused me distress today because I'm like, how am I going to do it? When am I going to get there? You know, this constant connection is challenging for us all. But imagine a developing brain. You know, we don't even know the damage we're doing to our kids by not structuring technology better from a developmentally appropriate way. And the book does that for parents. It does it for educators. It lays out when is it developmentally appropriate, you know, to engage in a virtual world. And, you know, we all think about it. When we were kids, we were given more responsibility, more freedom. You know, if we were kids before 2010, we were given more responsibility, more freedom, and more independence. And we've taken all that away. So kids are finding independence on a cell phone. And it's unstructured. It's totally untethered. You can get on that internet and there are no controls. The whole world is open to you. There's no way that's mentally healthy because we all knew PG-13 was appropriate. R was appropriate. X was inappropriate. R was appropriate once you hit 18. Now we have kids at age, who knows what age, on RX, and it's utter insanity, and we don't control it. We don't do anything. We act like it's not happening.
Well,
And the
and
Surgeon General is trying to get some warning ban, you know, just like on cigarettes. This could be dangerous to your health. But we'll see if Congress does that. Sorry, Mike, you were going to say something.
Well, I was going to say, I'm excited for the natural experiments that are going to come up as a result of this. I mean, Dave, so this is year 3 for you. So it'll be interesting to see when we look at similar schools and control for other things. Do kids without access to cell phones during the day do better academically? How can they not? I mean,
they're certainly more engaged. They're certainly more communicative. They're certainly less isolated. So, you know, all the things that we would look for, you know, how do we engage students? Well, this is a tremendous way to engage students, is to cut down on their distractions.
Well,
But I want to emphasize how much you've done, Dave. You know, so people listening, it's not enough to just ban the phones. You know, before 2010, we had plenty of disengaged kids from school, right? We had plenty of kids who were either long-term absences or were just, you know, eyes glassed over in a class. So we do need to do some training for our teachers. We do need some rethinking of the curriculum and do more experiential, outdoor, other types of ed. Like, we do have to be thinking about engagement. It's not enough just to ban the phones to get our kids re-engaged.
It's not. The other side of that coin, the free play, is huge. And so I have, you know, I've ordered, you know, I gave all my administrators and counselors a copy of the book. I am at the point where I'm trying to roll it out across our community, and I have to figure out how to do that. I just think there's a lot to this that we can delve into as a society and change the culture to raise healthier kids.
That's a perfect place to end it. Dave Blanchard, Superintendent of Schools for Schoharie Central in upstate New York. The book we talked about, The Anxious Generation, How the Great Rewiring of Childhood is Causing an Epidemic of Mental Illness by Jonathan Haidt. Thank you, Jen, for your summary and your great intro to it. And Dave, thanks for being so generous with your time. I seriously can't wait to start looking at this data in the next 3 to 5 years, especially with districts like yours, Dave, where you've stuck to it, and it'll be totally interesting to see. So thank you both so much. What a fantastic conversation.
Thank you. Great to chat with both of you. We'll see what's going on and what happens.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the School Leadership Show, a podcast for aspiring and practicing school leaders. Send your comments, questions, and show ideas to me, Mike, at schoolleadershipshow.com. And please consider rating the podcast in iTunes and leaving a comment. And definitely pass the show along to your colleagues.